I've got a photograph.
Right. My own photograph and a couple of others that are not there either.
Oh dear.
That's not to worry. Nothing.
I wish you could just click your fingers and sort. Okay, thank you. Gillian, if you'd like to start us off on agenda item 6, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll just briefly introduce and then hand over to Mark. It's an interim report on how well the control environment has stood up. Obviously, we've been having to work in very different ways over the last nearly 12 months now, including a number of urgent decisions that have needed to be made. So the report that you have today has been put together by Mark Tolson and examines how we've managed with that. So I'll hand over to Mark.
Thank you, Gillian. Thank you, Chair. As Gillian points out, the coronavirus pandemic, as you would expect, has had a significant impact within the Wakefield district, as it had both nationally and internationally. The Council has been at the forefront of delivering the local response at pace in conjunction with our partners and in conjunction in accordance with government guidance. This report therefore looks at the impact of the pandemic on local government from the perspective of the Audit and Governance Committee, covering the first 9 months of the pandemic. The particular focus here being the impact on the internal control environment and seeking to draw out lessons learned to date. It is worth noting that the report itself was written before the Prime Minister's announcement on the 4th of January, and so before we entered a third national lockdown, which obviously is likely to be in place to at least mid-February. The pandemic has set an unprecedented challenge for all councils to maintain business critical services, to reconfigure service delivery models to support health and safety of both staff and customers, and to determine and deliver support to businesses, our communities, and particularly our most vulnerable residents. We all acknowledge that the scale and nature of the pandemic and the government's response to it is unprecedented in recent history, and as such the internal control environment has been tested in many different ways. What I've looked to tease out within the report is how the different components have stood up to the test. Excuse me. As in any emergency situation, there will inevitably be learning. It is important that this learning is then built into the control environment looking forward in our future planning. A full debriefing will take place in the fullness of time, but right now the Emergency Planning Command Structure is once again coordinating the Council's response to the current lockdown. Within the report, I've looked to draw out some of the lessons learned to date, and these are included within the different sections of the report, which look specifically at the financial environment, risk management, governance and decision making, internal audit, counter-fraud arrangements, emergency planning and business continuity, together with health and safety and procurement. Members will of course be aware that the pandemic has also had an impact on the preparation of the 2019-20 annual governance statement, and I have referenced this in paragraph 14 of the report. Paragraph 15 refers to the annual assurance statement exercise, which will take place in 2021, and service managers will once again be asked to complete a questionnaire on their respective internal control environments. This year there will be a particular reference to how COVID has impacted on the internal control environment within their respective services, which will hopefully tease out some further learning which can be shared across the Council and picked up through the annual governance statement. Since the outbreak of the pandemic, there have been a number of executive decisions taken in direct response to COVID-19 requiring speedy implementation, as Gillian's referred. So to help facilitate this, the Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board agreed to waive the call-in provisions for a number of these decisions, including some key decisions, and these are identified in the appendix to the report, and I've highlighted those in green on the table. To ensure that the committee is able to see all COVID-19 related executive decisions taken during this period, other decisions taken by members which were subject to call-in are also included and identified in yellow in the final column. think it is sort of safe to say that the impact has been huge, and as we are doing so today, we have all had to adjust to online meetings and other forms of working. There have been some notable successes, but there have also been some opportunities for reflection and improvement in 2020. And whilst the bad is not over yet by any means, taking a few moments to think what's been achieved, the resilience shown and the lessons learned, I think will stand the council in good stead in the future. If I may just talk from a governance decision-making perspective, Chair, as part of that broader learning curve, it soon became clear early in the pandemic that councils across the country and their partners were all using different IT platforms to host the meetings, which were in the main dependent on their IT infrastructures. And as a result, members and officers quickly had to learn how to use a variety of platforms, and this will no doubt be the subject of broader discussions moving forward. Unfortunately, IT solutions do occasionally fail, especially when they are under stress as Skype and other video conferencing solutions are in the current climate. We've just seen a little bit about this morning. But in essence, none of the platforms are guaranteed to be of the required quality all the time. However, of the 52 remote meetings held to date in Wakefield, only one of those meetings has had to be cancelled due to failure of the IT solution. There have been some issues around external participants struggling to connect. We have a group of officers from my service, from Information Technology, Communications and Planning, who continue to work hard to overcome these issues as they present themselves and work towards improving solutions and access to meetings. One thing that the council may wish to consider moving forward, for example, is whether broadcasting of meetings should continue in the future, even when it's safe to resume face-to-face meetings. I've added in the report the viewing figures for the Planning and Highways Committee, which had 214 views in November, 96 in October and 114 in June, so certainly something for us to consider. I think finally, Chair, just a positive impact of the increased use of technology is that levels of confidence and skills in its use have increased dramatically, which of course opens up new opportunities for channel shift in the future. I'll leave it there, Chair, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mark, and certainly for me as an almost confirmed Luddites and technophobe, I now know also the words I didn't know before, like Zoom. And I found it quite hard to believe I was doing this remotely. But yeah, we're managing. Just want to say, I've said it before, at least I hope I've said it before, that I think the response of the council has been absolutely staggeringly brilliant. It's been almost a year now, I'm forgetting that, and it's gone from lockdown to coming back open, then a tiered stitch, and then another lockdown, and so on. It's been very difficult, and I think none of the people I would talk to or meet or see have actually have had any complaints at all about how you've gone about it. I mean, these people who run community centres and those kind of things. The business support was brilliant. The way you've managed, just the way you've simply managed everything, stepped up to the plate, and I think you've done a fantastic job. And I think I would hope this has proved beyond doubt that when push comes to shove, you really do need a decent state and a decent properly funded public sector to be able to do these things. And I certainly think you should all be extremely proud of what you have achieved in unprecedentedly difficult times. Now we have some questions. Nick Stansby.
Thanks, Chair. Maybe you might want to go to the comments first, just to, and then I'll ask my questions. But yeah, brilliant job that you're all doing. Do you want me to ask my question later or now? Because it's
well, can you do it now? Because I can't actually find your comment.
Oh, right, okay. Right, okay. Yeah, I was just wondering, Mark, thanks for that report and Happy New Year to you. You are doing a fantastic job in a very difficult situation. With regards to sort of funding that we're getting from the government, some will be used and some won't, I take it, because presumably when it was issued, there were certain shall we say, strategies that may have changed. Do we get to keep that money, and do we have free rein on maybe utilising it in areas? Because I noticed you said there will be an impact with sort of loss of job, loss of income, obviously, and of residents, and whether we could use the money from the government to offset reduction in income and maybe support those residents who have lost their jobs and that, or not? Is it ring fenced, basically?
I'll pick up at that one if I can. So thanks, Councillor Stamsby, for the question. To be honest, some funding is ring fenced, so the majority of the funding is ring fenced. So the biggest part of the funding we've had is for business support grants, and that is ring fenced for those grants, and should only be paid out for those grants. And government does ask for monthly reconciliations, and then we have to, on the reconciliation, we have to either we get more funding or we have to give back funding depending. So on the first tranche of grants, for example, back in April and May last year, government overestimated the funding for Wakefield and has asked for the monies back that we didn't distribute. Of course, we do everything we can to spend as much money as possible within the district, as you'd expect. So I think on those first tranches, we resorted to actually going out and knocking on doors to make sure that businesses in Wakefield put those application forms in. There is some non-ring fenced funding, but that tends to be primarily around the support to the council for its efforts and to compensate for us for losses of not grant funding but income. So, for example, closure of our leisure centres costs 450,000 a month in lost income, and that's net of costs. And if you think our sort of market rent income, our culture income, council tax, business support, etc., business rates income. So the majority of the non-ring fenced funding is actually to support the council, and the government's got many tranches of ring fenced funding. So good example, COVID management funding. We've got 4.2 million of COVID management funding to be spent on test and trace and things. What we will do in as we look to next year is to see, so we've got some funding from government, and you'll see in the initial budget proposals there's a £3 million fund in the 21-22 budget proposals, which is to enable the council to flexibly respond to the changing impact of the pandemic, both on the council but also to support the work of the Recovery Board and the resident subgroups and the economic subgroup to support the communities, residents and businesses. Hope that answers the question.
Yes. Well, it's raised lots more, but maybe yeah. I'll put them down on an email, Neil. Thank you.
No problem, Councillor Stansby. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Alan Garber, is a comment? Alan?
Yes, Chair, thank you. We've just taken assurance about the PPE. I think I asked the question last time to Glenn Humphreys. On page 17, it refers to difficulties to start with. Can we be assured that the supply of PPE is now not a problem? Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
Thanks, I'm not aware that it's a problem, Councillor Garbutt, and I will certainly confirm that and respond to you with an email.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got some more. Les, Councillor Shaw.
Thanks, Chair. Just a brief comment on what Alan's just asked there. I chair YPO, as some of you know, and I know that there's considerable stocks of considerable stocks up at YPO of all PPE, Alan, so for the near future, so that might help with that question. The comment that I wanted to, well, two comments, very quick. I just want to thank everybody. I mean, you look at this, and I know Nick's just said it, and I think one or two others, will say it, that the public sector's just operated fantastically, and our teams have done really well, and this report showed it. So I hope you'll take that back, Mark and Neil and all the other officers, to your teams, and say certainly well done for reacting quickly on those sides. But one issue for me, Mark, and you've touched on it in here, is communication in future. I don't think that this is going to go away. I welcome the fact that hopefully at some stage we can all get round tables together. But even when we do, the use of different technologies is here now. And one of the problems I've had is, and I'm sure everyone has around the table, is I've had to get used to Skype, Teams, Zoom, Buzz. Different organisations are using different things, and I just wonders, I know you've picked it up in the report, but really councils, certainly whether it's in the West Yorkshire area or bigger, should actually look at pulling together what systems in future we're going to use, rather than having 4 or 5 different systems. And I just wondered if you've got a comment to say whether we were going to seriously look at this with other councils. Thanks, Chair.
I think it's a good point, Councillor Shaw, and will no doubt, of course, be the subject of broader discussions moving forward. The budget proposals that are coming forward include the sum of money to move the council towards the use of Microsoft Teams, and I think that seems to be where councils are heading. That would, but yes, I think certainly subject to broader discussions between local authorities and authorities such as YPOs and the West Yorkshire Fire Authority and other joint authorities that we're members of.
Okay, satisfactory, Les. Next question is from Mr. John Morrison. Hello? John, can you hear me?
Hello, Chair. Thank you. Sorry. Could I ask about the inherent risk score of COVID-19? From the last meeting, I queried it and it was going to be reassessed. It's at 7.3. It is saying that the risk score, inherent risk score, is 20 and the residual risk score is 16. Is this after reassessment, please?
Chair, Bradley, I can pick this point up if that's okay.
Yes, please.
I can give assurance that in terms of, obviously risks aren't being presented to this committee, but they are being presented to the next one. So the committee on the 1st of March. Work is currently underway with the risk owners and with the management team to review the risks. And I can give assurance that that risk will have been reviewed and will be rescored, if appropriately, by the next committee. So that reflection in this report does not reflect a review of the risk, but it will.
Oh, fine. Thanks, Bradley. Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
There seem to be no more questions on that. We'll move on to the next item, which is Internal Audit Quarter 3 Update Report on agenda item number 7, and it's on agenda page 33. Is that, do you want to start us off on that, Julie?
I will do. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. So my name's Julie Cousins. I'm the Principal Audit Manager, and I'm presenting today on behalf of Jason Brooke, our Service Manager. So today I'm sharing with you our update report, which you'll find in your agenda packs at page 33. I'll draw out the key points from the report, and then I will be happy to take any questions that you may have at the end. The purpose of the report is to provide an update to this committee on the internal audit work completed between the 1st of October and the 31st of December 2020, and it ensures our compliance with public sector internal audit standards. If I can refer members to the main body of the report at page 37, and in particular section 2, this details the work that our team has undertaken earlier in the year in supporting the council in its response to COVID-19. Although this has lessened since Q1, our counter-fraud colleagues continue to support the business grant scheme and provide assurances over the process of the transfer of funds to local businesses. Paragraph 2.2 also gives members an updated position on the SIPFA guidance on the Head of Internal Audit Opinion, which has been finalised since our last report. As stated in Para 2.3, I'm giving full consideration to the contents of that guidance, particularly to where there is the opportunity to draw on those wider frameworks of assurance in giving the audit opinion. I can also confirm to this committee that I am undertaking the mitigating actions required to reduce the likelihood of a qualified opinion, and I will continue to keep you updated on this position through our usual update reports. If we can now move to performance, paragraph 2.6 gives details of the reports we issued in the period, which you will see are mostly focused on key financial systems. It's pleasing to note that there were no concerns from an opinion perspective on any of those pieces of work. Paragraphs 2.7 to 2.19 give members full details of the content of these audits. However, I thought it might be useful to perhaps draw your attention to two of those reports. Firstly, council tax, which gave an opinion of substantial in terms of compliance and control over billing and income collection. And secondly, housing benefit and council tax support, which also gave substantial opinions in the processing of new claims and changes in circumstances, which are important to our residents during these challenging times. Section 3 of the report details our two key performance measures that we report to the committee. Firstly, the completion of the annual audit plan, and secondly, feedback from our client questionnaires following the completion of each audit. Paragraph 3.3 details that we are currently reporting just over 40% of the plan completed, and I'm confident that in the coming weeks we will be bringing a number of pieces of audit work to their conclusion, which will increase our audit coverage. Members can also take further assurance from the fact that we have adopted a responsive and risk-based approach to our audit plan to meet the changing needs of the Council as we respond to COVID-19. And this approach will continue in Q4 as we seek to maximise the opportunities upon which we can base assurance. Our other key performance indicator is our client satisfaction feedback questionnaires, which are discussed in paragraphs 3.4 and 3.5. These show an average satisfaction score of 83% for audit work completed in the period, which is positive. Appendix B to the report at page 43 gives members a position statement of ongoing audit work for information. That concludes my presentation, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. A comprehensive report. Are there any questions? Yes. John Morrison has a question.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask what percentage completion is anticipated for the year end, please?
It's a little bit early to say at the moment, John. I would be hoping around about 60%.
And if it's 60%, and in these circumstances, that's still a marvellous achievement. But is it the case then that really the scope is being limited this year because it's impossible for it to be otherwise?
That is I mean, we are completing less of the plan than we would have liked to have done. But I think what's important for us to think about is that it's not only the completion of the audits within the audit plan that we can take assurance from, because as a team, obviously myself, our audit staff, our counter-fraud colleagues and our risk management colleagues are completing pieces of work this year that we wouldn't have probably done before. So we can draw those wider sources of assurance from those pieces of work. And I'm currently doing like an assurance map at the moment, John, where I'm looking at where we're doing extra pieces of work and where we can kind of draw that together to form our assurance opinion.
No, so that's an excellent approach.
Okay, thank you.
But is it the case, though, that the recommendation is still valid? I'm just concerned about recommendation 1, where it says for us to note there have been no limitations in scope.
Yeah, I mean, there haven't been any limitations in scope on individual pieces of audit work, which that's what that kind of refers to. We're currently focusing on high and very high pieces of audit work in terms of a risk approach. Yes. So we're focusing on the highest areas of risk. But yeah, we're not, it's a bit difficult to say at the moment, but I don't envisage us having to give a limited audit opinion, but I don't want to kind of be held to that at the moment, if that's okay.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie. Councillor Nick Stansby, you have a question.
Thanks, Chair. I just wondered, obviously, you know, you've got the same number of staff available at the moment, possibly less if anybody's ill. Are you measuring risk of fraud to the new COVID grants, and do we have to report back, and do we get deductions for fraud from, you know, from the money given to cover, say, for example, the business grants? And what's your sort of general feeling about the level of fraud in those areas? Is it being measured? Oh, sorry, these are too many questions, isn't it? Shall I just email?
I think, if Councillor Stansby, if I may ask if you email me, and then I can forward your email to Rob Blair, our counter fraud manager, who's leading on that piece of work. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Many thanks very much, Nick. Are there any further questions? Okay, I think silence. The next item agenda number 8, is the Redmond Review update, and it's on agenda page 51. And for that, we will go to Neil or Colette.
It's Colette. It's myself.
Colette, hi Colette.
Good morning, everybody. I don't know if everybody can remember back in 2015. There was a change to the local audit environment, and the Audit Commission Act 1998 was repealed, and therefore the Audit Commission was abolished and replaced with the Local Audit and Accountability Act 2014. This report is to inform members of a review that has been undertaken by Statutory Redmond to look at the effectiveness of the current regime since the Audit Commission was abolished. And to look at its ability to demonstrate accountability for audit performance to the public. It also looked at whether the current financial reporting was able to enable the public to understand and get assurance that the authority and the finances are sound, and also other factors that impact on local audit and the local audit market. The conclusions of the review were published in September 2020, and the MHCLG responded to those recommendations just before Christmas. The review had identified that for local audit to be fully effective, it had to be robust, relevant and timely. There had to be a balance between price and quality, and it needed to be transparent for public scrutiny. So Statutory Redmond had made his recommendations, a number of recommendations, and as I said, the MHCLG responded on the 17th of December. They accepted the majority of the recommendations. However, one of the recommendations from Statutory Redmond was about establishing a new organisation or body called the, what was it called again? The Office of Local Audit and Regulation, which would take on responsibility for procurement, contract management, code of local audit practice and performance regulation. So it was an overarching organisation that could look at everything. So since the Audit Commission had been abolished, different organisations had taken on responsibility for different areas, and he recommended that we should just have one organisation to take on that responsibility, but not a replacement of the Audit Commission. The MHCLG have not entirely rejected the idea, but they've said that they will review it in the spring, which is now. But I think the general view is that the MHCLG won't agree to this recommendation. But what the MHCLG did agree to was a review of the audit fee with a view to increasing the audit fee to enable external audit to be able to appoint and do the work that they need to do to provide the assurance for local audits. They also agreed with the external audit to recognise work of internal audit, providing it's consistent with the Code of Audit Practice. One of the other recommendations was to extend the deadline to the 30th of September for the completion of the audit of the financial statements, which is where we were probably about 3 years ago. I think it was the 30th of September and it had been brought forward to the end of July. But I think one of the main issues with that is that they weren't able to meet that deadline. So in the last couple of years, a lot of those deadlines have been missed. They also looked at one of the recommendations that the MHCLG have agreed to is a simplified statement within the statement of accounts that would provide additional information to the service users, which would look at comparing the service cost to budget, and also asking SIT for LASAC to look at this statement of accounts to see if it could be a bit more user-friendly, so that the general service users could understand it. And another recommendation, which is one of the areas that we already look at, is the improving the governance arrangements. So one of the recommendations is to ensure that there's a suitably qualified person on the audit committee, which I think as an independent member, which we do, and a regular annual meeting between external audit, the chief exec, the chief finance officer, the monitoring officer, which I think we generally do as well. Just seeing if there's anything else that I've missed out that oh yes, the last thing that I wanted to mention was that there'd be an annual report each year from an annual report from external audit to full council, because one of the issues that had been raised was that full council may miss out on some of the key audit issues they wouldn't be reported. So that was another recommendation that we should have. I think that's all the main points in the report, if anyone's got any questions.
Thank you, Colette. Are there any questions? Yes. Graham Stokes.
Yeah, morning, Chair.
Morning.
I'm just on the review of fee structures. I always thought that we actually went out to competitive tender for external audit. So I was to actually see that we were looking at fee structures being 25% less than actually required, which seems quite a large figure anyway. Report also mentions the shortage of staff to undertake audits. I just think, won't that be the same position even if we do increase the audit fees, if there will still be a shortage of staff to complete the audits?
Going back to the audit fee then, the audit fee has reduced quite a lot over the years. I think it's about 130,000 per year at the moment for the main audit, and I'm sure I can't tell you exactly what the figure was about 4 or 5 years ago. It was considerably more than that. When the Audit Commission was abolished, we were able to go out and tender ourselves for an external audit, or we could sign up to a system that had been set up by the PSAA, where they looked to procure external audit for all of local authorities who wanted to sign up for it, and that's what we did, and we did get a reduced fee. However, and I'm sure external audit can tell you more about this than I can. With that reduced fee, they still have to be able to appoint suitably experienced auditors. And I think one of the issues has been is that they have struggled to do that, and they've also had the issue of separating out the way that their audit firms are run. So they've had to separate out the local audit from their normal work. So they have struggled to do that. I can't remember the rest of your question. I'm not quite sure if I've answered the rest.
Nicola, would you like to come in there?
Thanks, Chair. I just thought it might be helpful, Colette. I think you covered it admirably, Colette, by the way, in terms of some of the challenges. But I just thought it might be worth adding that obviously the contract was competitively tendered, but it was quite a few years ago now. And I think that the focus on quality and the work programme that auditors are required to complete has moved on somewhat. So where you've had this procurement that fixes a price for sort of 5 to 7 years, but actually the industry has moved on in terms of the bar that's considered to be the minimum level of work that needs to be done has changed. So I think what the Redmond Review is recognising is that actually, you know, that procurement was of its time, but things have moved on somewhat and more work is required. And that's particularly around some of the more technical areas like pensions and valuations, where as audit firms we're told that we have to use particular specialists to perform the tasks, which obviously has a cost implication. And we do have some other costs coming down the pipeline, as Colette sort of identified, around separation, where the audit arms of the firms have to be separate from the advisory arm, and any sort of specialist work then has to be sort of charged at full cost. It can't be subsidised in any way. So that's something that we need to take into consideration. And I think around the number of auditors, I think it has, you know, if I compare it to when I started sort of 20 plus years ago, there are just less people coming into the profession. And I think the fee piece is around making sure that the work remains attractive so that all audit firms will bid for it, that you're not reducing the pool of firms that are willing to do this work. Because if the work is either loss making or, is not, is not seen as a sort of profitable work, there is a challenge that some firms won't stay in the market. And I think it's also a reflection that we need to invest in our staff. So if we aren't able to make the returns on the work, we can't do so, and that means there are just less people, because the skills and experience you need to audit public sector bodies are a bit different to sort of generic audit work, particularly in local government, where the SIP for code is so very different from some of the more general accounting standards that exist. Hopefully that just helps flesh it out a little bit, Colette.
Thank you, Nicola. Is that okay for you, Graham?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Very comprehensive answer for the difficult question. So well done. John Morrison, you have another question?
Thank you, Chair. I can understand the sense of an annual report to full council, but at what point in the annual cycle will that take place? So in other words, if a question is raised by anyone from the full council, how would that be dealt with?
So can I get back to you on that, because I don't have any detail at the moment of what that external audit report should look like and what it should involve.
Yes, no problem, Colette.
And perhaps if I could just come back in, Colette, I think, and maybe this is just my interpretation, but I think usually we produce, so after we've completed the audit cycle, we produce what's called an annual audit letter. So we're required to produce a summary of our work. And my understanding was that it would be perhaps presenting that annual audit letter to full council, so giving people the opportunity to ask questions about the work programme and the findings.
So would that be taking that responsibility away from this committee, or would there be two separate goes at the same report, as it were?
I think it would. My understanding was that it was supplemental. So obviously this committee would still look at because our annual audit letter is a summary of the different detailed reports that we bring to audit and risk. So I think the annual audit letter has always been a summary of those reports anyway. So those detailed reports would still get the scrutiny and challenge at audit committee, but that full council would almost have an opportunity to hear at a summary level all of those findings being brought together.
I can understand if full council have the opportunity to hear the points raised, but what I'm wondering about, will they have the opportunity to question because you can see the possibility then of conflict between the committee and the other body. I'm a little confused how this would work in practice.
Yeah, and that's a really fair challenge, and I think it's probably something that we need to, be quite careful about as we sort of work through what this will look like, because obviously it'll be our first go at it this year. So yeah, I think that's a really fair challenge.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. So we keep on that. Okay. Who's next? Les.
Thank you, Chair. Just two brief comments. Firstly, when I read this, I took some actual comfort in the number of things that I could tick off that we were already doing, which I'm quite pleased about. I'm sure that some of the other areas might not be doing some of the things that we're already doing, so I was quite happy with that side of it. And the only final comment I'll make is where it says that local authorities to prepare a simplified and standardised financial statement. I've said this before, best of luck, Neil, Colette, in doing that, because simplified to me on certainly things like audit is a very, very difficult thing to do, but the best of luck.
I think we've had that discussion as well. Yeah, it would be extremely difficult, but I just want to come in on that, Neil or Colette, and move on to the next question.
I think challenge accepted, Councillor Shaw. Challenge accepted. I mean, joking aside, we're on with a project this year, so we're looking at both the format of the statement of accounts as they are, but also an opportunity to look at a summary version, which is perhaps more, so I would say, user friendly. And to make that link then between that and the report that Cabinet goes to Cabinet on the outturn position. But certainly I think as it stands, the one thing that I would say is that our statements of accounts are not just our statement of accounts, but they're not user friendly. They're not the residents across the district, and that if they are designed to be for stakeholder information, then they're not fulfilling that purpose, let's face it. Or anything that we can do along with colleagues in other local authorities and along with CIPFA to simplify and present in a much better way, which still means that they're factual. We should be they need to be factual and to the point. But anything that we can do to help ease that understanding, then I think is welcome. And certainly we're very much in terms of taking on the Redmond Review recommendations and seeing what we can do to help users of our accounts to understand them, whether that's staff, whether it's members, whether it's residents or businesses. We're certainly picking up that piece of work in the next few weeks and months.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Gillian, Marshall, you had a comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's just picking up on what's been said already, but the committee may recall about 2 years ago doing a self-assessment against good practice for audit committee, and I think it would be timely just to revisit that, because I think a lot of the recommendations we've already picked up there, and just on the report to council, I think it will be important to align this committee's sort of annual report to council with the external audit letter, so that it comes to this committee first, and then it goes on to council together with this committee's observations and an indication of the work that you have carried out in the past year and the work that you intend to carry out, so that council can receive those assurances, and it will be taken at council in that way. Clearly there might be questions, but if it comes with the assurances about your work programme, then I think the risk of council having one view and this committee having another can be minimised.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, okay, thank you. We can move on now to agenda item number 9, the Governance Action Plan 2020-21 update. And it's on agenda page 57, and that is yourself, Gillian or Mark.
I'll pick that one up first, Chair, if that's okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
The purpose of this report, members, is to provide you with an update on the Governance Action Plan, which you agreed back in July, and which sets out those issues identified in the annual governance statement where improvement work is ongoing or where assurance reports were required. The first part, the action plan is broken into two parts. The first part contains the 8 improvement actions, and the second part then sets out the assurance reporting requirements which will be reported to committee during the course of the current municipal year, and a number of these have of course already been completed. So looking at the 8 improvement actions, I've included a progress update on each action in the second column, and I've added a progress update column on the right hand side of the action plan highlighting progress against the agreed timescales, and this is the column which is colour coded to show this more clearly. So of the 8 actions, 6 milestones are expected to meet timescales with 3 ongoing. If we look at the ongoing actions, how demand pressures on both adult social care and children's services are managed will continue to be monitored through the lifetime of this action plan, and as such are identified as ongoing. Committee will receive an update on demand pressures in adult social care at the March meeting, and you'll also recall the Corporate Director providing an update on demand pressure within the Children and Young People Directorate in September. Just to provide you with some additional assurance, demand pressures are something that are closely monitored and scrutinised by the Council's overview and scrutiny function, led specifically by Councillor Mrs Rhodes for adult social care and Councillor Jones for children's social care. Work is also ongoing to refresh the Council's approach to equality and diversity, and we have identified that EDI currently lies within 3 areas of the Council which can make accountability unclear. So in recognition of this and to drive the agenda forward, a review of the Council's approach has been commissioned and a steering group has been established to provide that strategic direction. Neil will be providing an assurance report on equality and diversity and as the next agenda item on today's agenda, so he'll be able to pick up any matters there in more detail. And finally, all milestones have been achieved to date with regard to the West Yorkshire devolution, which will culminate in the mayoral election in 2021. And members will also note that the milestones to date have been met with regard to implementing the Children's Services Improvement Plan. And again, progress against these improvements will continue to be closely monitored and kept under review by Cabinet, by the overview and scrutiny function, and the Corporate Director will also provide periodic updates to this committee. I will leave it there, Chair, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mark. Are there any questions in this report? No. Okay, that's fine. We can move on now to agenda item number 10, the assurance report on equality, diversity and inclusion, and it's on agenda page 77, and that's over to you, Neil.
Thanks, Chair. So this is one of the assurance reports that the committee receives. So it's one of the suite of annual assurance reports, and so this one is around equality, diversity, inclusion, and the purpose of the report is to provide those assurances to committee that our policies and processes are robust and embedded across the organisation. I'm providing this report today because I'm providing a caretaker management role across our policy, intelligence and performance function in the absence of the service manager. That's in case members are wondering why it's a report of the Chief Finance Officer. So this is a positive assurance report. It highlights the ongoing work which Mark has just mentioned there to further strengthen our approach in the coming year and very much to improve the outcomes for residents and communities. So at section 5 in the report, it sets out the council's statutory duties under the 2010 Equality Act and also the public sector equality duty. And at 6.1, you'll see that the report provides clear assurances that the council indeed meets these statutory duties. Our overarching equality, diversity and inclusion objectives are published on the internet in line with those duties. And as Matt referred to, in November 2020, we established a corporate equality, diversity and inclusion working group of senior officers from across the organisation, and the objectives of this group are highlighted at section 7.2. That very much reflects that the objectives are set in 3 different sort of areas of the council, depending. So you've got the communities service with responsibilities towards residents and vulnerable people. The policy sits within the area that I'm currently managing, which is the performance intelligence and policy service. And then we've got HR staffing matters under the auspices of the service director for HR and organisational development. And so the purpose of that group is to very much bring those senior officers together. And at section 7.4, you'll see in the report where it highlights the training and development that we do for elected members and for staff, and also how we're promoting some of the self-organised staff groups around BAME and carers, and how we're looking to extend that principle in the coming year. And things. The recommendations are set out at section 12.1 in the report, which are to very much note the positive assurances in terms of the council's approach to equality, diversity, inclusion, and that those are reflected in our strategic approach and service delivery, and note the ongoing proposed developments, which we'll be able to include in the AGS action plan and report back to members in due course over the coming months and year. Happy to take any questions and comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Neil. Are there any comments on this report? No. Right, we can move on. And thank you very much, Neil. It's also very positive things in that report. To the agenda item number 11, which is the Annual Information Governance Assurance Report, as agenda page 89. So Gillian Marshall will start us off on this one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm presenting this to you in my capacity as a Senior Information Risk Owner for the Council. I came to the committee this time last year with a similar report. I did have 1 or 2 concerns last year about how well GDPR had been embedded in the Council, and particularly around the timeliness of some of our responses to subject access requests. I'm pleased to say that presenting the report this year is a much improved picture for you. We're in a much better place than we were, and that is set out in the report. We've got a full suite of up-to-date policies and procedures, and notwithstanding the fact that the team have been working at home throughout the pandemic, we have managed to bring performance up to suitable levels, and we have kept it there throughout the period of lockdown and the pandemic. A lot of online training has been rolled out to staff. We accept there's still more to do in that area, but there's been fairly good take-up of that training that's been available. The pandemic did impact on progress in embedding some of the arrangements within the council. And so in September, I did my annual report to the council's corporate management team, and we agreed a slightly different approach to how we would embed this going forward. So we have a network of information asset owners across the council whose job it is to champion good information governance and GDPR compliance within their areas in the directorates. We had been getting that group together as a big group to be able to share information, good practice training, etc. That no longer works in the current environment, and so we've moved to an approach of taking it directorate by directorate. So each directorate now has its information asset owner group meetings. What we've then done is expanded what was the CIRO meeting into a full information governance board with representatives from each directorate attending that, so we get a consistent message across the council. For the year going forward, our focus is going to be on self-assessment, on embedding good practice and on training. But I think the progress we've made to date can best be seen in the section of the report that deals with the DSP toolkit, which was formerly the NHS toolkit. So when we made our submission in 1819, we had to accompany it with an action plan in order to meet the required standards to be able to share data with the NHS and social care, which is obviously fundamental to our public health and adult social care functions in particular. When we've resubmitted it for 1920, We have received an assurance rating of standards exceeded. So that is really, really pleasing. We have got the Information Commissioner coming in to see us in September to do a consensual audit, and we will be talking to the ICO representatives about further embedding good information governance practice, and particularly moving on to the issue of records management, both physical and electronic storage. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Gillian. Are there any questions on this? Right, it appears not. Thank you, Gillian. And the final item is on agenda page 97, agenda item number 12. It's the work programme. I think is that you, Mark?
It is, Chair. Just very briefly, the approved work programme is submitted for information. It sets out the agendas for the final two meetings of this current municipal year on the 1st of March and the 12th of April. It's submitted here just for review, and committee has the flexibility to add items to the agenda or take things off as they feel necessary. And I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And anybody any comment to make on the back page, Appendix A, of issues to be considered at the next two meetings? No? Well, I take it then that we're satisfied with that, and just to say thank you very much. I'm sure the committee would want us to pass on the very best wishes for Jason, and we have a question coming in now from John Morrison. John.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Apologies. Going back to the minutes, Colette was going to provide feedback regarding the revised budget figures. Were you able to make any progress, Colette, please?
Yes, I think from the minutes I wanted to clarify what the question was, and I think the question was around the level of spend compared to the budget. Is that right? I'm not quite sure if that's what the minutes said.
Yeah, I think from memory it was the level of actual spend to September compared to the revised capital programme. So I think, Colette, if you could just email that around to members so that we, I know we're updating the capital programme in advance of Cabinet in February and full council. So if you could email the latest revised budget to members with the if we can the spend to date up to the end of December, I think that would satisfy John's query, if that's okay.
That's great, thank you.
John, is that okay?
Oh, it is. That's excellent, thank you.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you very much. We have another question coming in now from Councillor Stansby. Nick.
Thanks, Chair. It was a question for Gillian Marshall, actually, regarding GDPR. The councillors have all got their permission sheets when dealing with queries from residents. Do we have anything that we can use sort of electronically and have electronic signatures on them or anything like that?
I'll ask the team to have a look at that and let all councillors know, because I appreciate you'll be doing a lot of your contact with constituents at the moment electronically. So we'll see if we can put something in place that will allow that to happen.
That would be brilliant. Thank you.
I thought, yes, thank you. Is that the final question now? Okay.
Sorry, yes, that answer. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Right, fair enough. As I know, we come to the end of the meeting. Again, to say the committee obviously passed on this very best wishes to Jason, and wish you all a happy as can be New Year, and let's hope it's better this year than it was last year. It doesn't suppose it get any worse. But thank you very much for your attendance. We are now off live.